we also have a story from you this week, right? The analysis piece that you did on your home state and how it's fared in the wake of about a decade of tightening its gun laws, right?
That's right. Yeah. So this kind of was prompted by this week's signing. Governor Jared Polis. I did a story on this as well. Governor Jared Polis just signed a bundle of new gun control bills, raising the age to purchase to 21 for all guns, a 3-day waiting period for gun sales. There's a provision to allow folks to sue the gun industry for gun crimes, so crimes committed with firearms by third parties. So this, got me thinking. Well, it's been about a decade of, several sessions now where Colorado lawmakers have passed a bunch of new gun control bills, and it's been one of the few states to actually do that over the last decade. So I thought, let's take a look at some of the crime stats and the suicide stats, and let's see if these gun laws had any effect. And so when I started digging through the data, pretty much in each case, mass shootings are a little tougher to parse accurately, but at least with violent crime and with gun suicides, it's been a straight upward trajectory since 2013, which was the first year when these sort of gun control laws started getting passed in Colorado. So at the very least, you have to say that these gun laws certainly haven't stopped the increase in violent gun crime or gun suicides, which is, a huge portion of the rationale for why they were passed in the first place.
Right. And it's not necessarily just the sort of nationwide uptick in violent crime that we saw, during the pandemic. This is just effectively an continual increase from 2013 through 2023, right?
Yeah, no, it's actually pretty fascinating to look at the data because, as you said, it's in almost every case, it's year over year, starting in 2013. I think in suicides, there was 1 year where it dipped. And I think in violent crime, there's some years where it's almost flat. But like you said, it predates the pandemic. It predates some of the spike we've seen nationwide, as you said. So clearly something else is going on here. And these gun laws are not having the intended effect that these lawmakers who set about passing them said that they would have.
Yeah, at least not to this point, right? And you looked at the neighboring states as well, just to try and give a broader view. So this isn't a trend that's necessarily happening with every nearby, every state that Colorado shares a border with, right?
That's right. Yeah. So this is a common critique when, perhaps gun rights advocates or certain people will say, well, why does this state with strict gun laws have all this gun crime? And a lot of times the rebuttal you'll hear from folks that are in favor of these laws is, well, it's because the neighboring states all have lax laws and it undermines the gun safety of that particular state. And Colorado is, it's clear it's surrounded by states that have more or less restrictive laws than itself. Every town ranks Colorado 12th in the nation in terms of strict laws. And New Mexico's 16th, so it's in the ballpark, but every other surrounding state is in the 30s or higher in terms of their gun law ranking. And so I went and looked at their gun suicide rankings and their gun homicide rates as well. And Colorado is firmly in the middle of the pack of all these supposedly lax states that have no restrictions and nothing to stop, their gun crime. And it's interesting. Some of the states like Nebraska, for instance, its suicide rate over that time has been flat. So it's not every state is experiencing these same upward trends that Colorado is. And right. Certainly some are, but clearly it's not a unanimous thing.
Yeah. And that, I think, is what makes the analysis a bit more interesting, right, than just looking at Colorado isolated by itself. You got to look at it in context with what's going on in the states around it, which do offer a pretty stark contrast to Colorado on how they approach gun laws, right? Obviously, most of the neighboring states do not have the same level of restrictions that Colorado has enacted. Obviously, there'll still be some time before these brand new regulations come into effect. But I think generally speaking, if you look at the larger picture in America, you don't see like this perfect sliding scale of gun violence based on or gun suicide based on how strict gun laws are in any given state. It's just not how these numbers play out. And it doesn't go the other way either. It tends to be a mix. And there's a lot more factors than just gun laws that go into whether your state has a high rate of gun murder or a high rate of gun suicide or a lot of mass shootings. Colorado has been particularly hounded by mass shooters, unfortunately. over that time period. That was another thing that you looked at, is some of the statistics on mass shootings, and Colorado has really fared very poorly, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's especially based on Colorado's population, its share of population with the rest of the United States. It's a relatively small state compared to the rest of the country. It only makes up about 1.8% of the population, but it's had 6% of the mass shootings of the since 2013. So over the last decade. So it's like you said, we're very overrepresented in this ongoing scourge of mass shootings, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, and it's still having mass shootings at a pretty high rate. I mean, there've been 3. According to the Violence Project, which
That's
is
right.
measures 4 more people killed in a public attack and excludes, crime related incidents from that, like robberies or such. But, they found 3 over the last 2 years, right?
That's right.
Since 2021, which is the second most, and only California's had more, which is a state that's 5 times the population.
Right. Yeah. No, quite literally the biggest state in the country. And it's worth pointing out because, a lot of these big gun control pushes in Colorado specifically have been prompted by these mass shooting incidents because, as we pointed out, we are so overrepresented in these incidents. And so the fact that these are still happening at a higher than expected rate in a state that has passed all the laws that are supposedly tailored toward that problem just goes to show you that it's not really having the intended effect that I think lawmakers expected.
Yeah, same. The Violence Project, again, Colorado is ranked it's the 7th in total number of mass shootings since 1966 under their definition, and the 3rd per capita. And really, mass shootings, because they're relatively statistically rare, obviously they happen far more often than anybody wants them to, and are a significant problem. But statistically, the 2 ahead of Colorado in a per capita basis are Alaska and Washington, D.C. And Alaska's had 2 since 1966, and Washington, D.C. has had 1. It's just that their populations are very small. So incidents per capita, if you have just a single one in a city of 600,000 or locality of 600,000, that makes your per capita rate very high. But Colorado is... is 3rd on that measure, and they've had 7, I believe, mass shooting incidents since 1966, and many of them in the most recent, last couple of decades here. So, it's interesting, and I think people should go and read the rest of it. It's a members piece, so you'll have to pick up a membership today, but it's a good example of the kind of perks that you get from funding the Reload with your memberships.